This is a 2013 Ford F-150 SVT Raptor, and it is the best used pickup you can buy if you want to save your money. Now, this may sound ridiculous because a used Raptor is like 45 grand, which is an absurd amount of money to spend on a used pickup truck, but I'm serious. Hear me out. To start, I should mention that I've borrowed this Raptor here in Sacramento, California using Turo, which is this service that lets you rent other people's cool and interesting cars instead of normal, boring rental cars. You can sign up for Turo if you click the link in the description below, and you'll get $25 off your first Turo rental. But back to the Raptor. Now, for those of you who don't know the Raptor, this is the cool, off-roader, high-performance version of the regular Ford F-150 full-size pickup truck. Now, the Raptor came out for the 2010 model year, and when it first launched, there were two available engines. The base engine was a 5.4-liter V8 with 310 horsepower, or you could upgrade to the 6.2-liter V8 with 410 horsepower. That's what this truck has, and of course, it's highly recommended. Now, this truck is a 2013 model with around 69,000 miles, and that means that it's probably worth around $42,000 to $45,000 on the used market, and that means that it's the best way that you can spend your money on a used pickup truck. I'm going to show you around the Raptor in a minute, and I'm going to show you all of its interesting quirks and features, but first, I'm going to explain why the hell I keep saying that it is a smart financial decision to spend 45 grand on a 5-year-old truck with 70,000 miles. You can get a new F-150 for that money, so why would you get this one? Simple. The Raptor doesn't freaking depreciate. All right, back in 2013, when this truck was new, the base sticker price for a Super Crew Raptor with the big V8 like this one was $47,000. This truck has a few options, so maybe the window sticker is like $52,000, $53,000. That means that in 5 years and 69,000 miles, this truck has only lost $11,000 in value. This truck has retained 80% of its value after 5 years on the road. By comparison, if you go on AutoTrader and look for a 2013 Mercedes-Benz S550, you will find that the average asking price is somewhere around $30,000, $31,000 compared to an original MSRP of $95,000. Now, that's before you even factor in options, and the S550 has retained only 32% of its value compared to 80% for the Raptor. And that's just amazing. I find this funny because I've lost track of how many people have told me, oh, you know, I wanted a Raptor, but my wife wouldn't let me because she says we can't afford it, or, oh, I wanted a Raptor, but it was just a little too expensive. And then they go and spend only like 5 grand less on a loaded F-150 King Ranch with horse saddles for brake lights. I want to shake these people and say to them, are you crazy? You can't afford not to get a Raptor. And this is true even of used Raptors, which depreciate incredibly slowly. Even today, Ford dealers are asking over the MSRP for brand new Raptor models, which is incredible considering that the new Raptor came out almost 2 years ago. Back in 2013, when this truck was new, asking over the sticker price wasn't such a big problem, and so this one probably sold for around its sticker price, and that means that it's one of the slowest depreciating vehicles on the market today. If you're buying a full-size pickup, you already know that you're going to have to put up with issues like its massive size makes it unparkable in big cities, and its bad fuel economy, and so why not get one that isn't losing any value? Anyway, with that out of the way, today I'm going to show you around the 2013 Raptor, and I'm going to show you all of the interesting quirks and features of the best pickup truck financial decision you will ever make. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'm going to give it a DougScore. And for more of my thoughts on the Raptor, click the link below to visit autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also compiled a listing of the cheapest used Raptors currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. Now I'm going to start the quirks and features on the outside of the Raptor, and specifically I'm going to start with the marker lights. Now, by federal government regulation here in the US, if a vehicle goes over 80 inches wide, it has to comply with a bunch of new regulations, including it has to have these orange marker lights in the front and red ones in the back. This is one reason why other pickup truck manufacturers won't build a Raptor competitor. If you get too wide, you have to comply with all these other regulations. But Ford was like, yeah, we'll comply, and not only will we comply, we'll make it cool. So they didn't just stick these orange marker lights on the roof like most commercial vehicles. Instead, they integrated them into the grille, which is really, really cool. I love the look of these orange marker lights in the grille. You also have a pair of marker lights down here on the front bumper, and then in the back, Ford integrated 3 red marker lights into the third brake light on the roof, and then there's another pair of red marker lights sort of on the bottom on the sides of the truck in back. It's a really cool thing. Ford took what was kind of going to be a costly, annoying regulation and made it into a very distinctive design characteristic of this car, and frankly, I think it's brilliant. And since I'm up front and talking about the marker lights, I also wanted to talk about the grille itself. Now, when the Raptor first came out, Ford truly had no idea if anyone was going to buy it. They had no idea it would become the huge success that it did, and so they didn't want to change too much. They did a lot of hardware, but they didn't want to do too many cosmetic changes and spend a lot of money in case it was a total failure. But it was easy to change the grille, and so Ford did that. They put in this big, massive grille that says Ford across the front like an old school truck, and it's a really cool look, another very distinctive characteristic of the original Raptor. Next up, another thing that makes the Raptor look really cool and distinctive from regular F-150s and regular pickup trucks is these flared fenders. But first, I want to talk about why Ford had to flare the fenders. Now, under here you have a dramatically beefed up suspension compared to a regular F-150. This thing has Fox shocks and has 12 inches of suspension travel, so you really can off-road over anything. Now, that meant that they had to lift the truck up, and they also installed these wide off-roading tires, which meant that the tires and wheels came out, hence the need for the flared fenders. Now, the cool thing about the flared fenders is they only flared the fenders. The doors are the same as you'd get in a regular F-150 Super Crew, but the front and rear fenders are flared so that they can cover the entire wheel. Now, one interesting thing I think about the wheels is the fact that they're only 17 inches. These days, the more you pay, you get cool vehicles, you want a 21-inch wheel or a 22-inch wheel. This is probably the coolest and most expensive vehicle with 17s, but the smaller wheel allows them to put on a larger tire, which is better for off-roading. Now, next up, moving around to the back of the Raptor, where there's a rather interesting item in the bed. You drop the tailgate, and you will notice that the tailgate has this feature shared with other F-150 models where there's a step. You can pull the step out, and then you can step on it and get easier access to the bed. Now, the problem with the step is that when you step on it, it's kind of wobbly, but fortunately Ford thought of that. There's this little thing that comes out that's like a handrail, although frankly, it looks like a cane, the kind of cane that Mr. Peanut would have, but then you step on into the bed, grab the handrail, and you can get in very easily and do whatever you have to do in the bed of your Raptor. Next up, we move under the hood, and as you can see, and as I mentioned before, this truck has the big 6.2-liter V8, 410 horsepower, a big upgrade over the mediocre 5.4-liter V8 with a mere 310 horsepower. Now, one thing I like about this engine, you can see that on the side of it, they've printed powered by Ford. That's a cool touch. My Ford GT also says that, and Ford race cars back in the 60s used to say that. It's kind of a cool little touch that Ford puts on some of their performance cars, and it's neat to see it on there. Now, one really cool thing about this engine, this truck has a really nice exhaust note. Even though it's a full-size pickup truck, it actually surprises me how good it sounds. Take a listen. Now, obviously, that exhaust note is unique to this Raptor, the first generation model with the big V8, because the second gen Raptor has gone to the new EcoBoost V6. It still sounds cool, but nothing really sounds like a big, naturally aspirated V8. And I honestly wonder if one day, when the Raptor is like a collectible vehicle in like 30 years, if this is going to be the one to have, the first gen Super Crew with the big V8, just because after that they went to the V6 and it isn't quite the same. I honestly think that might happen. But anyway, moving on to some other interesting quirks. One One is keypad entry. Now I point this out on every Ford model I review simply because it is so brilliant. There are these little buttons on the side of your car where you can punch in a code to lock or unlock the doors, and that way you can leave your keys in the interior if, for example, you want to go swimming or go work out and you don't want to bring your keys with you. Just lock them in, punch in the keypad code, walk away, and then you can come back to it, punch the code back in, jump back in, get your keys hidden in the center console or whatever, and just drive away. You don't have to keep your keys on you the whole time. It is brilliant. Next up, two other interesting items worth noting around here before we climb inside. One of them is this curve on the bottom of the window line on the doors. You might be wondering, what's this all about? Well, the theory here is that Ford wanted the window line to be up here so that it matches where the bed hits the windows in the back, which makes sense. But if the windows are up here, it blocks some visibility to the mirror. So in Ford pickups, you will see this window line that kind of curves downward so that when you're sitting in the driver's seat, you have the full line of sight to the mirror, which is an interesting design solution. You also see it in semi-trucks very commonly, but it's also included in a lot of Ford pickups. Good idea. Not such a good idea is the fact that on the mirror itself, it is printed power fold. Almost like they're telling people, yeah, I got power folding mirrors. I think they print it there so you don't accidentally manually fold it, which could damage the mechanism, but it is funny to see that they devoted like actual space on the mirror, which is for safety, to just letting you know that your mirror power folds. Okay, Ford, thanks for the info. Next up, moving on to the interior. Now, one interesting thing you'll find in the interior of this truck is that, like I said on the outside, Ford really didn't know if the Raptor was going to be a success, so they put a lot of money into the hardware, into making it cool, but they didn't put all that much money into cosmetic upgrades over the regular F-150. They didn't want to blow a lot of money in case nobody bought this thing. So the interior of this truck is really similar to just a regular F-150 pickup truck, and you can see it basically everywhere. The dashboard, the seats, the center control stack, the center console, just about everything looks like it does in a regular F-150. Now, as the Raptor became a massive success, Ford was able to spend a little bit more money to delineate it from the standard model, but they really didn't do that originally. With that said, there are a couple of upgrades over the standard F-150 that you notice when you spend a little time in this truck. For example, they printed Raptor on the seats, though you won't find another Raptor logo in this interior. You also get an SVT logo in the Raptor's gauge cluster to distinguish it from a standard F-150, and there's a little red line on the top of the steering wheel to help you know when your wheels are centered when you're off-roading. But maybe the biggest change that they made is this little panel in the center console right in front of the shift lever. This is, I call it the SVT Raptor panel, and it includes three things. One is a group of upfitter switches, which are auxiliary switches that are designed to sort of link up to whatever you want. If, for example, you want a winch or a group of headlights on the top of the truck, you can hook them up to these auxiliary switches. The other two things in the Raptor panel, one is hill descent control. So when you're going down a hill, you don't have to just ride the brakes. The truck will figure out the best speed for you. And the other is my favorite button in this truck, which is marked simply off-road mode. It doesn't just say off-road on it, which it could. Instead, it says off-road mode in this font that's italicized. It looks like it's in a hurry, which I find kind of interesting. But those are the only real interior changes over the regular F-150 in the Raptor. Next up, we move on to the other interior quirks and features of the Raptor. I'm going to start inside the center console, and specifically inside the center console lid, which is rather interesting. You can see there are little places where you're supposed to put specific things. There's one holder for pens. There's another for your cell phone, although I can't imagine any actual cell phone fits in here. I think it only works if you have your cell phone on like a belt clip. And then there is a slot for your MP3 player, which kind of tells you when this truck was built. If you want to stick your iPod in there, well, that's what it's for. Now, another interesting thing in this truck in the center console, it has a little tray on the top where you can put coins. And the owner of this truck, the guy I rented it from, well, he's got actual coins in here, and they're carefully placed in the correct slots. Although it's worth noting he only has quarters and dimes, no nickels and pennies. Must be nice to be Rick, the guy with the F-150 SVT. Doesn't bother himself with the small change, only has his quarters and dimes. Anyway, the center console. Now, the other interesting thing about the center console is the fact that you can lock it. The center console is huge, and you can stick just about anything in here. I think you could even get a laptop in here. And so it has a lock that you can lock it up. Interestingly, the glove box does not have a lock. I guess Ford figures they might as well give you a lock on the larger of the two storage spaces, so that's where you'll stick stuff if you want to lock it when you leave your car. Next up, one really cool feature I like. If you look to the left of the steering wheel, you will see the dial that controls the headlights. It has this sort of rugged, tough look to it. Okay, fine. Look to the right of the steering wheel, you will see the same rugged, tough look on the dial that controls two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. Fine. But then look to the right of the infotainment system and you will see the 12-volt outlet. But the cover for it has that same rugged, tough dial, which is really cool. They've mimicked that look throughout, all three of those things, for symmetry and purposes of visual attractiveness, even though they could have just put on a boring, normal cover over that outlet. That is a smart piece of design. Not such a smart piece of design is turning up the airflow in the climate controls. You look in the center control stack and you have 4 dials in here and you're like, all right, it's easy. You just twist a dial and it turns it up. Oh, if only that was true. As it turns out, the 4 dials have other purposes: radio volume, tuning the radio, and then the 2 on the bottom are for temperature. Instead, if you want to change the airflow, you have to find these tiny little airflow buttons at the base of the center control stack and just tap them a bunch of times for however much airflow you want. That is an absolutely terrible design. Everyone should have airflow just be a dial. Now, next up, another interesting item. I noticed on the turn signal stock that there's 2 windshield wiper fluid things. There's one on the end, you turn that, it washes the windshield. So I'm thinking, well, what is this other one? It has like a little washer and then it says F and it looks like a camera. Do you like film your windshield washing? Well, it turns out that that's the front camera. If you twist that little dial on the signal stock, it activates the washer for the front camera. So when you're off-roading and mud is coming up on your truck, if you want the front camera to still work, you just twist that and then it will wash the front camera and get all of the mud and grime off your camera. That's what you get when you spend big money on a truck. You don't have to go out there with a rag and wash it yourself. Now you may be thinking, well, who cares about the front camera? Well, the front camera in this truck is actually kind of cool. It's intended for off-roading. You go into the gauge cluster and you can enable the front camera to come on anytime you're in 4-wheel drive and you're in off-road mode and you're going under 15 miles an hour. If you meet those conditions, the front camera actually displays on the infotainment screen instead of the nav system or the radio or whatever, and that shows you exactly what you're about to off-road over. So if you're on like a rocky trail and you can't quite see over your big F-150 hood, the front camera will show it for you, and that is why the front camera has a washer. The other interesting button in this vehicle is the button on the shift lever. In your car, it's probably just a little button you press and then you shift into gear. In this thing, the shift lever button is massive. It's like 3 inches long. It is everything you see my fingers on right now. That's all shift lever button. I can push it with any one of my fingers and then you can shift it into gear. Next up, moving on to the infotainment screen, a couple of interesting items in here. One is the fact that you can change the wallpaper. It allows you to change the background. And you have 2 options. Ford is generous. One is the Ford logo, okay? And the other is the default photo, which as you can see is nothing. It's just a black screen. Next up, moving back to the gauge cluster, the coolest thing in there is something called quiet start. Now, I showed you that this truck is kind of loud, but if you don't want to wake up your neighbors when you're starting your truck in the morning, you can turn on this feature called quiet start, and then when you turn on, it will start quieter than usual, and that way it doesn't start rumbling and getting loud until you're well outside your neighborhood so your neighbors don't complain about your loud pickup. Next we move on to the back seats, where there's really nothing worth noting back here. There is a lot of room, but you get that a lot in crew cab pickup trucks. It's pretty comfortable back here, but there's nothing really noteworthy. Maybe the only interesting item in the back seats is that the seat bottoms fold up so that you can use the back seat area for like storage if you want to. Since the bed isn't enclosed, if there's anything you want to lock up when you walk away from the truck, you can stick it in the back seats. Also, when you flip the back seats up, there is a little storage cubby under there for specific and small items that you might want to stow away. And so those are the quirks and features of the 2013 Ford F-150 SVT Raptor. Now it's time to get it out on the road and drive it. All right, driving the Raptor. Now, first things first, I want to make it clear that when I say that this is a great financial decision, I don't mean you should go and tell your wife, oh, Doug says I got to get a Raptor, when you were previously looking at a Hyundai Elantra. The fuel economy hit alone is going to turn it into not a good financial decision anymore. This truck is only a good financial decision if you were already considering a truck. So you're gonna get the bad mileage, you're gonna get the size. So my thinking is, well, why not just get the cool one that isn't losing value? Like, that makes so much sense to me. But I'm not advocating that this is like a better financial decision than a mid-size car or something like that. especially because most people don't need this size and this heft. I just want to make that clear. Now, one thing I absolutely love about this truck is the exhaust note. I really like the exhaust note in the new EcoBoost Raptor. I think it sounds great, but this sounds better. And I hate to admit this also, but I'm into EcoBoost. I think it's a great idea. I'm into the environment. I want to help out, but there's nothing like a big V8. The torque, the acceleration, I'm gonna floor it. It's probably not as quick as the new one, but it's not slow and it sounds so much better. And the thing about a good, big, naturally aspirated V8 is the instant torque, the instant response, the throttle response at the tip end of the throttle just when you tap it. You can't beat that. In terms of driving experience, I've been in the car for a few hours. I drove it on the highway and it's fine. Like, it's a fine highway cruiser. The off-road tires seem to make it not incredibly smooth. I suspect a King Ranch or a limited F-150 would be a nicer ride, but not much nicer. And this truck has everything by virtue of being like the top of the line Raptor. You know, they have all the off-road stuff, which is cool, but also they've included, I mean, I'm sitting here with cooled seats. It's got a sunroof, which is a rarity for a pickup truck. Yeah. I will say there is a lot of suspension travel you can feel on the road, and so the ride can feel a little unsettled at times. When you're going around bumps, it's not exactly dead flat. There's body roll, etc. With the Raptor, you have the king of the road driving feel, and where you sit up above everything. It's very nice, just like a lot of full-size trucks. One complaint I hear from some people about the Raptor is, well, it's too big, and I don't want it for that reason. But they also they get a different full-size truck. Truthfully, yeah, the Raptor's a few inches bigger than a regular full-size truck in a lot of dimensions, but it doesn't feel bigger when you're driving it. If you live in full-size truck country, this won't feel any larger than any other one. If you live in the city, this will be just the next level of unparkable compared to a regular full-size truck. Driving it definitely doesn't feel like a luxury vehicle. The interior is not luxurious. It's functional, it's usable, but it's not luxurious. The ride quality is not luxurious. You spend a lot of money and you don't necessarily get luxury. You get a lot of features, you get a lot of off-roading stuff, but no one should buy this thinking that they just got the nicest pickup. It certainly isn't like the nicest. The new Rams are really nice. Sierra Denali is decent. This isn't on that level. Truthfully though, it's hard to complain about Raptor. It's just good. And the thing is, even if you hate it, you know, you buy it, you drive it a year, you hate it, what are you out? Sales tax? I mean, you don't lose any money, so it's like, all right, well, that sucked, but I'm out of it. And it certainly isn't a truck for everybody. Some people will think that it sucks, but I don't. I love this thing. And if I felt that I could pull off a pickup truck, I would have one of these. And so that's the 2013 Ford F-150 SVT Raptor. This is an amazing truck. It looks cool, it has amazing off-roader capabilities, it has a ton of power, it has a lot of features, and it'll tow and haul just like a regular F-150. The fact that it is a great financial decision is only an added benefit. Now, I know a lot of people are going to watch this and they're going to say that they would prefer a brand new F-150 instead of one of these that may have reliability issues. But these have been pretty reliable. And you know that if you get a new F-150 XL and you're driving around in your new truck with your cloth seats and your regular normal suspension, you will encounter a Raptor on the road and you will wish that you had followed my advice. And now it's time to give this truck a DougScore.
Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Raptor is very cool looking, especially nice for a truck, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Acceleration is decent, though it's not quite on the level of the new Raptor. It gets a 4 out of 10. Handling is only average. It's a big truck with a lot of suspension travel and thus some body roll, and it gets a 3 out of 10. Fun factor is good. This truck isn't especially thrilling on-road, but it's a blast off the pavement, though it's not quite as capable as the new one, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Cool factor is good, but waning as these trucks get more popular and more common, and it gets a 6 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 26 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories, starting with features. The 2013 Raptor has a lot of tech, but it's not quite on par with the latest and greatest, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Comfort is decent, and there's a lot of interior space, though it's not especially luxurious, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Quality is acceptable. The interior isn't particularly nice, but the Raptor is durable, and reliability is supposed to be strong, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Practicality is good. It seats a lot, hauls a lot, and tows a lot. Only fuel economy and sheer size drop it down a bit here to an 8 out of 10. Finally, value. This truck is a good deal for its capabilities and for its size, and it's not losing value. I almost never do this, but it gets a 10 out of 10 for a total daily score of 35 out of 50. Added up, and the DougScore is 61 out of 100, and here's how it compares to rivals. The new Raptor is simply better, both as a fun weekend truck and a daily driver, but the 2013 Raptor is better than basically everything else. If you're looking at a pickup or even an off-roader SUV like the 4Runner TRD Pro, look at a Raptor, even a used one. You won't regret it.